Since the dawn of mankind, human beings have imparted value upon physical objects. That one fateful day when Ooga turned to Booga and gave him a shiny rock for a fresh chunk of mango was the day the physical game was born. Yes, that's right, dear viewer. The physical game is a game of ownership. A never-ending dance of trading this thing in exchange for that thing. Human beings are extremely resource-driven creatures, and in the face of scarcity, we tend to not only treasure our physical possessions, but cherish them with an undying fervor. But in this new digital age, what exactly does owning something mean? Whether it's little Timmy's Fortnite V-Bucks, that one Netflix subscription you share with about 5 other people, along with the Spotify you pay for so you can exclusively listen to the Fallout 76 cover of Country Roads.
Country roads, take me home.
It's likely you've either spent money on or consumed some form of digital media in the last 10 years. And with the internet continuing to become more and more essential to our daily lives, the consumption and ownership of digital goods is at an all-time high. Everything from Bitcoin to OnlyFans to freaking NFTs. There are so many digital goods out there just waiting for you to waste your money on them. It's overwhelming. Now let's turn our attention to video games. Video games are one of the last bastions of physical media, and even they are on the way out. Companies like GameStop as well as local game stores are dependent on you buying physical copies of games in order to stay afloat in today's market. There's a reason these guys have pivoted so heavily in the last several years to focusing on selling pops and collectibles. Sure, you can buy digital games at GameStop, but what are you, some kind of masochist? In all seriousness, the debate over physical versus digital games is not one that is often taken lightly by many folks. People who are hardcore collectors scoff at the fact that a person could amass a collection of digital games, arguing that the death of platforms and services like PlayStation and Xbox are inevitable. And while this is something that's hard to argue with, I mean, well, most everything is going to cease to exist someday, including the piles of plastic laid out neatly on shelves, give or take a couple thousand years. Over on the digital side, people argue that digital games are far more environmentally friendly, as they take less resources to produce and create far less pollution. This is somewhat true, however, some say the electricity consumption needed to transfer gigabytes of data across miles of fiber optic cables buried deep below the ocean can be just as damaging to the environment. So kind of a moot point anyway. But screw the environment, this planet is going to shit in like 10 to 20 years anyway. Day 1 patches are pretty much unavoidable these days, so even if you buy a game physically and play it day 1, you're going to be downloading gigabytes of patches and day 1 updates regardless. Kind of making the environmental argument a useless one. And even if there isn't a day 1 bug fix, when was the last time you bought a Call of Duty game that came entirely on disc, where you didn't need to install about 500 billion gigabytes of add-on packs? It's kind of hard to talk about digital versus physical in a non-biased manner, so I'm gonna come out and say it. I'm part of the all-digital gang. Sure, some older games can't be bought digitally from any online retailer, but the convenience of digital games far outweighs the hassle of physical media. I find popping a disc into my console's disk drive to be a pain in the ass. I have to stand up, walk all the way to my shelves, pick the right game out, and then I'm probably going to have to download an update patch anyway. Even if you're a casual gamer and end up accruing any small collection of games, if you're going the all physical route, it's going to take up so much space. I'd say about 5% of the games I personally own are physical, and they fit nicely and neatly onto my little shelf. But can you imagine that other 95% of games I own fitting into this tiny room? I'd be drowning in absolutely useless, musty boxes of plastic as I struggle to find that one copy of Far Cry 4. In all seriousness, I think we do lose something with this all-digital reality we're currently living in. We lose that sense of community on an opening night as droves of people gather outside a game store on a game's launch night, an experience that is now relegated to the past. This is not something exclusive to games, but it sure as hell takes away some of that fun that people used to have leading up to a new release. And as digital media continues to consume our everyday lives, I don't exactly know how that same experience can be replicated. I think it's something that should be addressed, but also something that's nearly impossible to do given the current system. I also think digital games have been detrimental to the health of the gaming industry in the long run, and the over-reliance on day one patches allows developers to adopt worse business practices. Even worse is the digital peddling of goods meant to take advantage of children and individuals with weak impulse control, shoveling an endless sea of useless in-game items down people's throats under the guise of microtransactions. I don't necessarily think microtransactions go together hand in hand with digital games though, and it's not fair to blame this business practice solely on the sale of digital games alone, but rather the current cost of game development and developers overstepping their boundaries in terms of what is morally acceptable when it comes to funding their games. In conclusion, I think there's a lot of benefits and drawbacks of digital and physical games. I don't think it's even worth debating at this point as to which means of consumption is more viable, as they are both equally as valid depending on what you want to get out of the experience. As for which media is more prevalent these days, I think it's obvious that digital goods have taken the world by storm. It's not just in gaming, but in general, and the sales of these goods show no signs of slowing down anytime soon.